much for being here this afternoon. I hope you leave here with a little more knowledge, a little bit more open mind, and I hope that this is just a foot in the door to your learning. Hopefully, you'll be able to go away from it. So let's start. Who here has knowingly met somebody who's left-handed? We have a lot of people who know somebody who's left-handed. Any left-handed people here? I'm not picking on you, but left-handed. When did you decide to be left-handed? I mean, you must have known that it was going to give you difficulty in life, being left-handed.
Yeah.
Right? So when did you choose to be left-handed?
I don't think it was ever really a choice. I just kind of was.
When did you know you were left-handed?
When I was a child and my parents kept chastising me for using my left hand to do things that I should be using my right hand to do them.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting fact. There was this sudden spike in left-handedness back in the 50s and 60s. Why?
Because children were forced to write with their right, and
Until
then
that point.
we stopped forcing them to write with their right.
Right. So kids, especially kids, and also adults, got to explore who they were with their handedness. Some even discovered they were ambidextrous, that they could use both hands. It wasn't the rigid enforcement of being right-handed. It was this sudden increase. It wasn't a social contagion or a social experiment or the internet of the 50s, which was Encyclopedia Britannica. But it happened because individuals were allowed to be themselves. Use the hand that suited them. How many here have knowingly met somebody who's transgender? Oh, come on.
Yeah, I can say yes, yeah. Yeah.
How many people here have knowingly met somebody who's transgender? Yeah, we should see all the hands up. Exactly. Okay. But we are only 1% of the population. Left-handed, 10% of the population. The thing is that you can't always tell somebody who's left-handed. It's not a choice. You can't necessarily tell who is transgender. It's not a choice. Before that, we will acknowledge the fact that we are Mi'kmaq, the ancestral unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. I am Major Michelle Backhouse. My pronouns are she, her. I am the outgoing Cultural Evolution Coordinator, and I am the lead Positive Space Ambassador, facilitator for 14 Agreement. Before we get into my story, we're going to learn to sing from the same song sheet. So we're going to get to learn some of the acronyms, the words we use, words we don't use, their meanings and things like that. Any PSAs in the room? No, public service announcement, Positive Space Ambassadors. So we should know this. Some of you should know. This is the government's acronym for the last 2 years since the 2S LGBTQI+ Secretariat was stood up. Anybody know what the 2S stands for? Sorry?
Spirit.
Two-Spirit. Exactly. Why is it at the very front?
Because they're our First Nations.
Yeah, it was part of reconciliation because until then, you would see LGBTQ2, you were tacked on as an afterthought. So it was part of reconciliation, Two-Spirit, and that only applies to Indigenous persons from Turtle Island. They put it at the front. They are the first people of this nation. So it's part of L, lesbian, I think we know the rest, right? Gay, bi, what's the T?
Trans.
Transgender, Q.
Queer.
Or questioning. Can stand for either. Questioning being somebody who's not quite sure where they are on any spectrum and they're still exploring themselves.
That's me, my career.
I is the one that usually gets everyone for intersex. And we'll learn a little bit more sign at birth, how does that usually occur?
It's a girl.
A quick cursory glance of external genitalia. Penis is a boy, no penis, it's a girl. Boom, simple, done. Usually based right, on external genitalia. The thing is that in the past, that quick external glance didn't necessarily turn out to be correct. Or the baby was born with indeterminate genitalia. Way back when, the doctors used to just tell the parents, we'll be right back, hustle the baby off, do a quick little surgery on the side, bring it back. Congratulations, you've got a baby girl. That used to happen without the parents or the individual's consent.
Still
or
does.
knowledge.
Really? Oh, in Canada.
Later, the doctors would actually consult with the parents and say, we recommend that you raise your child as a girl. We'll do the quick operation.
Michelle, how recent was this happening? It's pretty recent.
It was still happening in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah. It's like
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's it. Good. Thank you. Good point. If you've got any questions, yell them out when you've got them, because that's the perfect time to answer them, because somebody else may have the same sort of idea. But yeah,
it's
it was
crazy.
still fairly recent. So you think it always worked out? No. So now what they will do is they will do, if there's anything medically required, they will, obviously an emergency situation, but normally now they won't do anything. They will let the child grow up and tell you who they are. Sometimes operations are not even required, but they will then, with the consent of the individual and the parents, then they will discuss about surgeries for those who are intersex. Yeah, we'll discuss that. Can anybody here tell me exactly the definition for biological sex? It's a problematic term.
Is it based on chromosomes? Okay.
Ah, if you know a little bit, grade 4.
But that's
XX.
not all the chromosomes.
XY.
There's not just 2 chromosomes.
No, but that's what everybody automatically assumes. Everyone turns to the XXXY. Simple. Not that simple. Got this beautiful little piece from a ocean biologist. This is Rebecca Helm. This was her tweet in response to a tweet from an author of certain fantasy books involving wizards and broomsticks and things like that, whose name shall not be spoken. But, so, now that we're talking about biology, well, let's do a little bit of a talk here. Let's talk about sex. If you know a bit about biology, we'll say XX, right? And XY. Female, male and female. This is chromosomal sex. But is it biological sex? Turns out there's only one gene on the Y chromosome that really matters about sex. It's called the SRY gene. During human embryonic development, the SRY protein turns on male-associated genes. So having an SRY gene makes you genetically male. But is this biological sex? Sometimes the SRY gene pops off a Y chromosome and over onto an X. Surprise, now you have an X with an SRY or a Y without it. So what does this mean? So a Y with no SRY means physically you're female, chromosomally you're male, and genetically you're female. An X with an SRY means you're physically male, chromosomally female, and genetically male. Biological sex is simple. There must be another answer. I'll just pause right there. The Olympics used to do chromosomal testing for sex in Olympics. There was a case, a number of years ago, many years ago, a grandmother, lawn bowler, British lawn bowling grandmother, who had like, I don't know, 10 kids and like 50 grandkids and all the rest of it. Turned out she was male. Chromosomal. Because of the SRY. Oh, no, she was actually a functioning female every other aspect. It's not that simple. So, sex-related genes ultimately turn on hormones in specific areas of the body. And receptors of the hormones by cells throughout the body. Is this the root of biological sex? Hormonally male means you produce normal levels of male-associated hormones, except a certain percentage of female higher level of male hormones, and vice versa. Any recent examples? You can think of that, females with high testosterone.
Caster Semenya.
Yeah, boxer. There is
Runner,
also
actually.
a number of long-distance runners from Africa who have naturally occurring high testosterone. They are not allowed to compete in women's sports unless they are taking medication to lower that naturally occurring testosterone. Some of them have taken it to court. Some of them have capitulated and started taking medication so that they can compete. But it's natural occurring. They can't help it. It's not cheating. They're not meant. It's just the way they are. But because they have this biological advantage, they're seen as a threat. We have to lower that to the same as the other runners. So if you develop in your body may produce enough hormones for your genetic sex, not enough, sorry. So leading you to be genetically male or female, chromosomally male or female, hormonally non-binary, and physically non-binary, except the cells have something to say about that. Maybe cells are the answer to biological sex. Cells have receptors that hear the signal from the sex hormones. Sometimes those receptors don't work. Like a mobile phone that's on do not disturb, call, you just don't get an answer. So what does this mean? It means you may be genetically male or female, chromosomally male or female, hormonally male, female, non-binary, with cells that may or may not hear the male, female, non-binary call, all this leading to a body that can be male, non-binary, or female. Obviously, try this out. It's very complicated. Very few people have ever had all of these things tested. Unless you have a genetic defect that you don't want to pass on to your kids or whatever, very, very few people have actually had this in-depth of testing. They have no idea what their chromosomes or their genes or anything like that actually are. So most people appeal to the, well, most people are male or female. Fine. There's a bell curve there, though. Most are, but there are those outside of that normal XXXY. Interestingly, when chromosomes were discovered back in, I'm getting the date, 1882. The doctor who actually discovered chromosomes, in his research, he found that the majority of males were XY and the majority of females were XX, but he also identified that there were other variations to it, but they didn't make it into the final report. And he also said that chromosomes alone should not be used to determine human sex. So that was right from the individual who discovered chromosomes. He knew that there was far more involved in being male or female than just the chromosomes. Obviously, the reason she doesn't ask is, students finding out that they're not exactly who they are and they would attend, wait, assignment isn't common. Biological sex is complicated. Before you discriminate against someone on the basis of biological sex and identity, ask yourself, have you seen your chromosomes? Do you know the genes of the people you love, the hormones of the people you work with, the state of their cells? Since the answer is always no, please be kind, respectful. Respect people's right to tell you who they are. Remember, you don't have all the answers. Biology is complicated. Kindness and respect don't have to be. You'll learn a lot more about this if you come to one of my PSA courses as well. Expand a lot more on this kind of stuff. So intersex is basically a person's chromosomes, hormones, or anatomical sex characteristics fall outside the conventional classification of male or female. They don't neatly fit in because of one of these things that is slightly askew from what is expected. At birth, most individuals are assigned one of the binary, because there are still jurisdictions that don't recognize anything other than male and female. That's slowly changing. There are now provinces that will allow the parents to leave the birth certificate blank or put an X on it and let the child determine exactly who they are. Gender identity. Anybody? Who you are. How you identify yourself within society. It is very personal and individual. Whereas gender expression is how you show the outside world who you are. Gender expression can be done through clothing, hair, mannerisms, voice, all that kind of stuff. It will show the world who you are. Most people think that gender is on a spectrum, A to B, man to woman, somewhere on the spectrum. It's actually more like a big ball of wibbly wobbly, gendery wendery stuff. It's time, it's space, it's who you are. It can change as you grow, changes as you discover who you are and evolve. It can be anywhere. So rather than think of it as a spectrum moving around on a spectrum, think of it more in this big cloud. You can be anywhere within that cloud. Which is completely different from sexual orientation, which is who you're attracted to, who you love. They're not the same. Completely different. You may have heard the term cis. Anybody? Some people would say it's a slur. Funny thing, English language is made up of many other different languages. Cis is a Latin prefix. And it means on this or the same side. Opposite that is trans, which means opposite or not in alignment with. So we've got cis being on the same side, trans opposite. In Italy, they talk about cis-self and trans-self. On this side of the Alps, on the other side of the Alps. When we apply that to the English language, though, we've got cisgender and transgender. Cisgender being that your sense of who you are as an individual is on the same side or in alignment with the sex that you were assigned at birth. Whereas trans is that your sense of who you are is opposite or not completely in alignment with the sex that you were assigned at birth. Couple of things. There is no such thing as transgenderism, because an ism is a distinct doctrine, cause, or theory, often oppressive and especially discriminatory attitude or belief. Being transgender is none of those. It's also not an ideology, because an ideology is an opinion or belief of an individual or a group. Again, being transgender is not an ideology, but you'll hear those two terms bantered around in social media, sometimes mainstream media, but really they don't exist. We're not a past tense, we're not transgendered, and we're also not a transgender as much as somebody is a tall. What? What's gender inclusive language? Well, we're just trying to make everybody feel comfortable. Back in the day, MC gets up to the podium. What were usually the first things out of their mouth?
Ladies and gentlemen.
Ladies and gentlemen. What's an inclusive way of greeting everyone?
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, everyone. Boom, done. Too simple. If you want to be a little more specific, maybe it's a graduation, good day, welcome, honored guests, graduates, family members, everyone else. So you've singled out some important people, but you've then also still included everyone as well. Yeah. It's a way of communicating, right? Treating everybody with the same respect. We're not going to get into gender pronouns, but again, come take a positive space course and we'll get far more discussion. But basically, you've got the gender pronouns, he, she, he, him, non-gender pronouns, they, them, sie, zim, their, and all the rest of it, which are called neopronouns or new pronouns. You don't have to be transgender or gender expansive to use a neopronoun. It's just something something that they prefer to use other than he or she. Again, this is just a quick introduction. To learn more, you take a PSA course. Dead naming.
Hey, Michelle, can you go back
Yeah, sure.
just one sec? I'm learning things here. So,
Okay.
okay. I've
So,
never seen the French. No, at the bottom.
Yeah, and so actually, for the French-speaking countries, there are now countries that are starting to use this. So it's still kind of gendered, but they're kind of trying to make it neutral as well.
Yeah.
So for whatever, if it is a masculine, feminine, or neutral, they're still trying to make them neutral by putting the IL and just saying yell
Yeah.
for all of them. And apparently Colt Rose has actually started teaching that as well, which I found interesting when I had a PSA run into me and go, you know what, they're actually teaching that over at Colt Rose.
Oh, all right.
So, yeah. But probably won't catch on too well in Quebec.
Well,
Not
Academy
sure if the language police might be after you for using something like that.
L'Académie française is not followed by Quebec most anyways.
Or in French, you just use the more formal.
Yeah.
Dead naming, as a noun, is the name that a transgender person is given at birth and no longer uses after transition. If you dead name somebody, right, it's called dead naming. If you dead name somebody accidentally, okay, apologize, move on. If you continually dead name someone, what can that lead to? Harassment. Exactly. New or odd reason to have known would cause stress for the individual? Absolutely. And in the workplace, it will eventually meet all 6 criteria for harassment. Coming out. Something I don't personally like to use. I would use it, but for me, this isn't how I live my life. But coming out, public self-expression, becoming evident, declaring oneself to the public, making a debut because the notion of like a debutante's ball, coming out to society, that's where it originally came from. A lot of times now we say coming out of the closet, but that also has some negative connotations. Things like skeletons in the closet. Right? Bad things happen in the closet sometimes. So some people don't like to use that. But a lot of people will say that they have lived their life in the closet and they're coming out. That's that. For myself personally, I like to say I live my life in the shadows. I would step out of the shadows every once in a while and then retreat to the shadows. A few people got to see me while I was out of those shadows and then I would quickly retreat. But my other self, this self, was always present. It's just not necessarily visible. Things that we try to avoid. Things like puberty blockers. This medication doesn't actually block puberty, it delays puberty by blocking the signal. If you have not had puberty yet, you take this puberty pausing medication, it will pause that puberty. If you stop taking that medication, puberty will start. Boom, no problem. Your body says, okay, the signal is there because the signal is being processed. You start producing the hormones that your body would be producing naturally at that time. Like myself, I'm taking a medication very similar to that. I am definitely not blocking my puberty. This happened a long time ago. But it still has the same effect. It blocks the signal for the production of testosterone. We also try and say gender-affirming hormone treatment. Because a lot of time, even though the community will still use HRT, hormone replacement therapy, that is more tied associated with females who are postmenopausal. Because they're replacing the hormones that the bodies aren't producing anymore. So we're not really doing HRT, it's gender-affirming hormone treatment. That is the preferred terminology. You can still say HRT, we know exactly what you mean. But
Old language.
what do you think gender-affirming care looks like? What do you think the first step in helping somebody is? What in providing gender-affirming care?
That
It's not
depends on the
rushing them
individual.
down to the to the school nurse and having an operation that afternoon.
It depends on the individual.
Depends on the individual, but the very first thing is you believe the person when they tell you. You believe them. That is the first step in gender affirming care. If somebody tells you this is who they are, believe them. The thing is, it's not about learning to accept somebody. You accept them, and then you learn about them. Acceptance followed by education. So the first step is believing the person. If someone came up to you and said that they've got this ache in their side and it's been there for 2 weeks, you're just going to blow them off? No, you're going to believe them. That's the first thing you want to do, is believe somebody when they tell you something. After they've told you, and they've made the choice that, okay, as of Monday, this is the name I'm going to go by, and these are the pronouns I'm going to go by. You accept that. You go, okay, excellent, thank you. If you make a mistake on Monday, referring to them by their old name, or their old pronouns, and you say, sorry, thank you very much for correcting me, I will do better. Make sure that you thank them for letting you know that you got it wrong, that you have educated them. They're not the problem. Might then move on to social transition. Email changes, clothing changes, things like that. So presentation, hair, makeup, clothing. That's the next step in affirming care. That may be all the individual needs. They may not want any medication or any operations. That's maybe as far as they want to go. That could be make the rest of their life comfortable. That's it. But we have to, at some point, if you're going further, contact knowledgeable medical care professionals. That can be problematic. The lack of knowledge amongst a lot of medical professions, it ends up that the individual educates the doctor or the nurse practitioner on what's going on. It's often said that as a transgender person, we have to be a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a physiologist, a chemist. We have to be everything, and we often are because we've done a lot of research before we actually go see a doctor. Starts with, first of all, going to see your family doctor. Family doctor would then refer you maybe onto more of a specialist. There are some around here in Nova Scotia, down in Halifax. So the assistance is there, but because they're limited, it may take you a while to actually get to see these people. So in the meantime, you live with your name change, you live with your social changes. But eventually you'll get there. Maybe after you've lived for a while, you know what, I want to take that next step. I would like now to go on to gender affirming hormone treatment. That may be full on, or it may just be microdosing, just to take the edge off. Again, very individualistic. Only after a certain amount of time, you're going to get to doing some sort of medical intervention. It's not something that happens overnight. Months, years. I don't know how long the waiting lists are right now for Montreal, which is the Centre of Excellence for Gender Affirming Medical Intervention. But it could be, you may not have even an appointment for a consultation for 6 to 8, 10 months. After that consultation, it may still be an 18-month wait. It's not happening overnight. Some fun facts on regrets. Having kids, 7%. Getting married, 25% regret rate. Knee replacement surgery, anywhere from 6 to 30%. All general surgeries, 14%. Breast surgery, including cancer, 24%. Chemo, 7 to 12. Transgender-related surgeries, 0.3 to 1% regret rate. All of these have lasting, life-affecting outcomes. Only one of the above requires a psychiatric approval. They're all life-changing. The one at the bottom requires additional approval before you go ahead. That's common other surgery that has a 99% success rate would be seen as a miracle. Some fun facts on detransition. Accurate numbers. So detransitioning is when you go backwards on your transition journey. The problem is that accurate numbers are unknown because of the collection methods from surveys. There was one survey back in England on a number of transgender youth. It was a mail-in questionnaire. Half of the participants dropped out. So what did the researcher do? Chalked them up as detransitioning. Completely skewed the numbers. What do we mean by detransition? Right? That's the thing. It's like, what do we exactly mean? Do you mean all the way down to the surgeries and then reverse? Or do we mean you've done a social transition, you changed your name and pronouns, lived that way for a year, and like, you know what, this doesn't really fit me, and then go back to using your birth name and pronouns? Technically, that's a detransition. What the stats don't also do is collect the fact that people do that and then continue on with their transition. But they're chalked up as a detransition, even though months or years later, they continue their transition journey. So it gets lost. So detransition rates very hard. Some of the other reasons why people detransition. They're transitioning for themselves. However, society gives them hard times. They may lose their job, their family, their friends, church, all the rest of it, and then they're getting pestered and harassed after they transition, and they feel that that's too much for them to live with, so they detransition. They would much rather live a miserable life as their previous selves than try and live where they're always being harassed. That is one of the reasons for detransition. And again, the detransition rate amongst transgender members is about 1%. So 1% regret, 1% of those people who regret it, detransition. There's also an issue with psychological care post-transition. It's very similar to cancer, mental health for cancer treatments. Once you've transitioned, success, you're done. You don't need any support. Just recently learned as well, for cancer survivors, Nova Scotia Health does not provide psychiatric assistance for those who have survived cancer. There's assistance there for those going through cancer treatment, but once you're cured, that's it, boom, carry on, happy life. A lot of those survivors have survival guilt. They need somebody to talk to. There's now a special fund set up at the IWK to assist those kind of things. But again, once you've transitioned, you're considered a success and you don't need to talk to anybody anymore. So that affects. Life is too wonderful to live in the closet. You know what? Life is meant to be lived. And we're supposed to be happy, right? That's what it's all about. Live your truth every day. I knew definitely when I was 9 years old that I was different. There'd been a couple of inklings of something before that time, but definitely 9 years old. It was back in England before we emigrated. My sister had a nurse's costume. I had a body's costume. Typically gendered dress-up costumes. I really wanted to wear that nurse's costume for whatever reason. It was too small. What I did though is I took a pair of my mother's nylons, my Bobby's jacket, Bobby's hat, and I took the black cape from the nurse's costume, wrapped it around my waist. I went out into the house as a policewoman to direct traffic. That was my play at 9 years old. I didn't think anything wrong with it, but I felt good about myself. Parents saw me through the window, kind of chuckled, I got embarrassed, took everything off. But that was when I knew there was something different about myself. Since that day till recently, there has been a voice in the back of my head telling me I needed to do something. I knew it wasn't just about clothes, but heterosexual guy who likes to wear dresses, i.e. I'm a cross-dresser. That's what I thought. But there was something more to it. Despite the fact that every single day I would be looking at girls and being very jealous of how they got to dress and what they got to do. If anybody remembers the Sears catalog, I'm really dating myself with the Sears catalog. Whenever it came, that spine would get broken to the junior miss of the women's section. Because I would be the first one to grab that book and crack it open because I wanted to see what the fashions were. And I looked at that and I imagined what it would be like to be able to wear these clothes and be able to look like that. I have always wanted to look like, be seen as, be treated as, and do things as a girl or a woman. Obviously, life goes on. You have to grow up. But guess what? That voice in the back of my head, it just kept either tapping the door very quietly, letting me out, or just whispering. But, and I'll refer to her in the third person, this 22-year-old young, good-looking lady has been resident in the back of my head since I was 9 years old. Sometimes she was nice, whispering to me, knocking at the door gently to let her out. Sometimes she got very belligerent and yelled at me and kicked the door down and I could not control her and out she came. After that, it would be very difficult to get her back in the back of my head. I did though know that it wasn't just about the clothes, because I grew up on a hobby farm in central Alberta, and when nobody was home, I would put on my sister's barn clothes and go out and do chores. Because in my mind, the pigs were seeing a girl doing her chores, and that made me feel good about myself. Obviously, growing up in central Alberta, I was the only person in the whole world that felt this way. I had no way of reaching out and discussing it with anybody. The burn barrel on the farm, a couple of times, saw a bunch of clothes get burnt. And I did the purge, feeling guilty about what I was doing. Why was I doing this? What's wrong with me? Maybe if I get rid of everything, that'll solve the problem. Just made me really angry when I realized after spending months and months and lots of dollars, all just went up in flames. And it didn't solve it, because it wasn't a problem. It did, though, provide some interesting situations going through pilot training in Moose Jaw. It's when, that's sort of when now I look back and think, you know what? I don't know what it's like to be a regular guy or cisgendered male. Going into Regina on the weekend, going to clubs, first of all, maybe the mall, going to clubs. I'm checking out the girls. Probably thinking something quite different from the other guys. I'm looking at her going, love her hair, love that dress, wonder what it would look like on me. Boy, you know what? I would really like to be her tonight, but not tomorrow morning. Guys probably thinking the same thing. I would really like to be with her tonight, but not tomorrow morning. I don't know. Possibly. It also gave me, again, in retrospect, in hindsight, that I was in a number of situations where I felt uncomfortable, such as the back bar in Moose Jaw, or house parties. Student pilots, house parties, Moose Jaw, right? Videos playing. I felt uncomfortable. Did I do anything? No. I didn't say anything or do anything. I found an excuse to leave early because I felt extremely uncomfortable in those situations, and at the time, I didn't know why. I do now, and I can understand it. Because I was also starting to experience things on the other side, feeling that discomfort. I just didn't realize it at the time. It wasn't until, growing up, being conditioned to be male, to be a guy, there's that expectations. Get yourself a girlfriend. girlfriend, get married, have kids, house, job, all of those typical expectations. For me, those didn't happen until I was in my 30s. So I'm a late bloomer. I'm a late learner. I'm a slow learner in many different aspects. But when that time came to get a serious girlfriend, I knew that this wasn't something I could hide from. So I told her the truth that I knew at that time, which was that I was a cross-dresser and I liked to look like a woman. Yeah, early on in the relationship, no problem. Even had a couple of nights out in Halifax, great time. But kids came along, everything got packed up in boxes, shoved into the back of the proverbial closet. Or in my case, she had to get shoved into the back of my mind again. She didn't go anywhere. She was still there, banging at that door, yelling at me. I couldn't do anything about it at that time. As the kids grew up, there were opportunities for pop out a little bit, but again, not much. It wasn't until I released from the military the first time in 2010. I came back from Afghanistan after flying UAVs over there for 7 months. I came home and said, "You're posted to Winnipeg." I said, "No, I'm not." I released and went back to Kandahar for another 3.5 years as a civilian. I knew where the threat was coming from in Kandahar. It was coming from 3 Mile Mountain. In Winnipeg, didn't know where the threat was coming from. Safer, okay. So some people call me mad, but it was during that time that I had lots of free time and good internet. It was actually better in Kandahar than it was in rural Nova Scotia at the time, which was suffering badly. But anyways, I got a chance to explore. And I started to realize that, just a minute, I'm not the only one who feels this way. Wow, there are other people out there. Whoa, hang on, this is a dark rabbit hole, back out, delete, delete. Hopefully nobody saw that. That happened as well. But for the most part, it was like, okay, there are people out there who think the same as I do. Oh, but most of them were in England or the UK or the US. And then I would find, hey, that's Canadian. Wow. Hey, here's somebody from Nova Scotia. Wow. Hang on. I didn't know this person. They work on the wing. Even got down to that. But I was able, through the internet at that time, to start to understand who I was. I came across a couple of really good blogs from friends, and they were writing the stuff that I was thinking. It's like, how is it that you have written down exactly my thoughts? And then that's when you realize that it's like, this is not an uncommon thing as one might think. But as we say, life goes on. I did military service, right? In Kandahar. But it was after I got back into the reserves in 2016 that I had already made contacts with friends down in Halifax. They were running a positive space program to support members in Halifax. That got stopped, and it went to a national program. I had met a member here on the wing who was extremely frustrated with their transition. There was no support mechanisms, nobody there to help them. They were frustrated with the process. It was taking too long. And I said, I've got to find how I can help somebody. Because by helping them, it was also helping myself. Because now I had, through the internet, through actually writing a blog, which turned out to be my own self-therapy, that I started to understand that there was something more to me. Again, it wasn't just about the clothes. It was about an internal feeling. This was who I was. And so I managed to find out that the Positive Space program was being offered in Ottawa, got the DCO to wing office to scrounge up some funds, went off to do 2 days. It was after day 1, and a testimonial from a member there and her story, and the day 1 material that we learned, that I realized I could be my authentic self. So day 2, it's another one of those bursts in my life. Day 2, I showed up to class as Michelle. It was the first time I had been out or expressing this part of myself in front of a group of basically strangers in a completely new environment. Pulling up outside of the, what's west? The Ottawa base to the west. Carlin campus. Right? Pulling up parking, walking across the parking lot to the commissionaires, handing them my mail ID. It getting my temporary ID, and them not blinking an eye. Full acceptance. And I got so much confidence from that 2-day course that I actually flew back from Ottawa to Halifax to Michelle the next day. With Air Canada, didn't encounter any problems whatsoever. That was my first. So people have asked me, so when did you start your transition? I don't have a hard and fast transition date. My evolution has taken decades, and it's been occurring since I was 9 years old. What I have is basically a bunch of important dates that were a bunch of firsts. Things like, so 6 years ago, May 30th, 2018, when I first came out to a group of individuals at training, and then flying home. That July, I was able to ride on the float with CFP Halifax. I had friends down there, they invited me down to come down. That was my very first pride event, and it was phenomenal. In 2019, it was the first time that I actually facilitated a PSA course as Michelle. June was the first pride flag at the main gates. There you go. That was the first pride flag to be flown at the main gate. It was also the day that I went into work. This. I had briefed my coworkers, and my CO knew, DCO knew, but it was the first time that I actually went into work like this. It was a Monday, and it was the biggest non-event ever. I just took over the desk as duty watch officer. People came in and went, oh, hey, it's Michelle working the desk today. How was your weekend? That was it. Other sections came in a little bit later after handing the paperwork first thing in the morning, with a flying schedule and such. And it was like, do you have a moment? I have a question. I said, absolutely. Ask away. That was, again, is that a start date? It's one of my firsts. One of many firsts. Then I started popping up into your newspaper after that. I did a public speaking up in Wolfville. In 2020, what was it, February of 2020, I actually came across the term bigender. I went, oh, maybe this is best descriptive for myself. Somebody who has both male and female gender identities resident within them. I thought maybe that's a good fit for me. That's how I'll start describing myself. But the more I got to express myself, the more I realized. And there is somebody here who asked me one of the hardest questions I have ever been asked in my life. It was after completing a course down in Halifax. I did the harassment advisor course down in Halifax. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to challenge myself. I'm going to do this as Michelle all 4 days. And I did. And at the end of those 4 days, I felt absolutely comfortable, absolutely confident. And then Natalie asks me, so which side is stronger? It's the hardest question I have ever been asked in my life. But what was it, like 3 years later, I eventually got around to answering it. 2.5, 3 years, something like that. Because I still needed in my own time to evolve and understand myself. Sometimes people see things before you actually see them yourself.
So how would you answer that now? How would you answer that now?
Well, obviously my female side is stronger. I identify as a transgender woman with a bigender element.
There you go.
I still say I have a bigender element because at home on weekends, I don't fully express my female self. I let my male self creep in. It's not always there, but it's there enough. It's hard to not, with long hair, earrings, no beard, right? It's a little bit hard to go back to being fully masculine, but I will still masculinize, is that a word? Myself a little bit for weekends and after hours. I also say I'm lazy on weekends. But this was the very first transgender flag raising, and we raised that for the last week of June of 2020. I say I have lived my life in the shadows up to this point. The Aurora newspaper was there. They published get a call the next day from the public affairs. Can you be in the Wing Commander's office tomorrow at 1 o'clock for an interview with CDC Main Street? So I went from living in the shadows to a spotlight being shined on me. So we were there, 2 cell phones, talking to CDC Main Street. I was more nervous about listening to that interview later on in the day than I was while I was actually talking to CDC. But yes, I went from living in the shadows, big spotlight shined on me. And back then, I was still identifying as male most of the time, so I used my male name so everybody knew exactly who I was. No hiding anymore. But I don't worry about that kind of thing. There's Colonel Cook and a few of us, including Natalie, standing there, putting up the transgender flag for the first time. As I said, I still have that little bit of bi-gender, that little bit of masculine lives in me. This was from a few years ago, just to kind of compare how I saw myself. Again, one of the other important dates that may be considered a start of my transition was actually the 16th of February of last year, 2024. That's when I decided it was time that I needed to take the next step and start taking gender-affirming hormone treatment. Up to that point, it was never on my radar. I thought about it 2 years earlier. I'd made an appointment with the nurse practitioner, and then I canceled because I wasn't ready to take that next step. My evolution, I love that word, my evolution has taken decades. Where other people take 4 years, I've taken 4 decades. I've done just a little step, got comfortable. Okay, let's take the next step, get comfortable. So that is my way of having done things. That's it, other people go, boom, this is it, I'm starting this day, Monday, this is my new name, new pronouns, nobody refer to me this is when I'm starting hormones, this is when I'm getting my appointments done for my operations, all, right, people do that. For me, I just wanted to take it slow and explore who I was. So we eventually got around to doing a newspaper article. That was in the Aurora newspaper back Transgender Day of, just before Transgender Day of Humanity. And here, basically, I do tell my story. Sarah did an excellent job of questioning me and me giving answers back. It's a little bit different in the way it's presented, but I love the article. We try to get it national. It's like it's a perfect piece for Maple Leaf, especially for today. No. No. Not even the messages. But for me, people ask me, why am I visible? Why do I do this? I could have just as easily decided to change things socially, just go about my life. But my mantra is, be the change, lead by example. And the only way that I can lead by example is to be visible, to show that we're just regular people. It is something that is near and dear to my heart. It is something I never expected to be doing in my life at all, especially later in life. It's something I discovered way late. Again, as I said, I'm a slow learner. But I now enjoy being able to participate in whatever I love to do. I play on the women's soccer team. I play on the women's hockey team. Guess what? Full acceptance. They don't care. Now, the fact that I'm 63 and can't keep up with half of them, or more of them, that might have something to do with it. But I have talked to competitors, and they just fully accept me for who I am. On the soccer pitch, coming off the pitch, I've got bruises up my arms and sides and everything that prove it, that basically we're out there fighting for the ball and the elbows are flying. They don't care. And for me, myself, whether it's on the hockey rink, soccer pitch, it's like you're out there, you're concentrating on ball or puck possession, next play. That's what it's all about. And it's so much fun. I never got to do this stuff when I was younger. I was too timid. I was too quiet. I wanted to get through life in the middle of the pack. I didn't want to be top. I didn't want to be bottom. Let's just get through this thing. Just sneak through it. Not anymore. I am quite willing to stand up, be visible. In today's environment, it is said that, standing up and being visible, we open ourselves up to targeting. 8, I have to acknowledge that I have had the privilege of not having had anybody come up and verbally abuse me or put me down to my face. It may have happened behind my back, but no one's dared to challenge me. I've also been very privileged that I've spent my whole military career here in Greenland. For the last number of wing commanders, known them by first name because we were all captains the first time around. They've always had an open door policy, and I've been able to talk to them if I need it. I also acknowledge the fact that I've had male privilege. The fact that I have seen things as a male, and I have been in those positions of privilege and not realized it. And that is something that, through the Positive Space Program, we are trying to make allies aware of the privileges that they have. And through those privileges, being able to amplify the voices of any marginalized group. Being visible for an ally isn't just showing up at a flag raising. It's being there for somebody that you hear is being harassed. You don't have to deal with them directly, but somebody over here, 2 people over here telling bad things, you can interject. Stop it right there. That's being an ally to that individual over there, even though you don't actually know them, you never actually interacted with them, but you're still an ally. Allyship is not something that's once a year. It is every single day. You don't decide to be an ally sometimes, and not other times. You either are an ally or you're not. As I said, for me, again, I have been very, very privileged in my position, my rank, my experiences. But I would love somebody to sit down and go and challenge me, because I want to ask them why. Why is it you think that? Why? 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 And continuously asking that question, why? Until you find out what the root cause is. Because there is a root cause, but they may not even be aware of it. So this is my authentic self. So I said, sometimes I'm still masculine, a bit masculine on weekends. But for the most part, I thoroughly enjoy who I have evolved into. And it is something that brings me joy. It is something that I want to make sure people understand. And with that, I open the floor to any questions. There is no question out of bounds.
If you had wound up as being corporal back house, do you think your experience would have changed?
No, it would have been completely different. It would have been. That's why I acknowledge my place of, of rank.
Confirmed.
My privilege of rank. Right? That's why I'm trying to use that privilege to help out those others at lower ranks. And that's what having privilege is about, is helping others who can't help themselves. Right? If you have other questions and you just don't want to ask them in this forum, stick around. I'm sticking around for any other questions, or you can send me an email. Go ahead.
Michelle, first, thank you for sharing your story. The world is changing every day. What's your latest challenge?
The challenge that the community faces right now is that misinformation. Misinformation, disinformation, and outright lies. A lot of, and I can't get political at all, not even from the States. But what is happening in the world is there are organizations and groups of people who are trying to create solutions to problems that don't exist. One recent example down in the States, actually no, it was NHS over in Scotland, where in the last 5 years they had recorded, I think it was like 25 4 complaints about transgender people using the washrooms that coordinated in 5 years. So it was averaging 3 a year. Okay, so that was the big deal. Oh, there's been these harassment complaints. But they weren't substantiated. There was no threat. When you look at the US, there are more trans people who are beaten up in bathrooms than there are cisgender females. And those people who are beaten up in bathrooms, cisgender females and trans women, are beaten up by cisgender males. So the biggest challenge for the transgender community right now is to stick together and to make sure that our truth gets out there. Again, battling these ideas that there are solutions to problems that don't exist. Very quickly, banning trans girls from sports. NCAA, 520,000 athletes in NCAA sports. When questioned, the president of NCAA knew of less than 10 transgender athletes. 0.00052%. And yet, there was this big outcry. We were going to ban them because they were a threat. There was less than 10 amongst the 520,000. Same thing with kids' sports. Banning kids, transgender girls, young girls from playing with their friends. There's no threat. If a child, this is a little ugly, if a child does not go through male puberty, just like any other girl, there's no threat. In actual fact, even adolescents, when you're on your hormone replacement therapy, most of the time, our testosterone is a way lower than a cisgender female's because of the medication that we're on. And recent studies have shown for the IOC have shown that transgender athletes actually suffer from lung volume, lower body strength and endurance. And I can attest to that personally when I started hormone treatment before soccer season last year, and my legs were just not working as well as they used to. And I could not sprint nearly as far or as fast as I used to be able. I would have to keep taking breaks. That first year of hockey, not this past year, but the year before, same thing. I would be pushing my legs and I would say, come on, I need more out of you. And they're going, no, get back to the bench. They just weren't giving me anything. And I would be gasped. I'm gasping for air. So many times I've been asked, are you okay? When I get back to the bench, because I'm so out of breath. I just need that 30 seconds to catch my breath, to get myself back. But I had noticed. I've always been physically fit. Growing up on a farm, everything was manual. Since then, within the military, I'd always bike to work and things like that. I hadn't participated in CAF sports. Now I can because I want to. But even for the fitness test, previous 3 years, I had got high silver. 3 years in a row. I started hormone treatment. 8 months later, mid-bronze. And I was pushing it because I wanted to challenge myself to see. And that was against the male standard. So even though I was on hormones for 8 months, I was still competing against the male standard, and I dropped from high silver to a mid-bronze. I just could not get my legs to do what I wanted them to.
We lose muscle mass,
Yeah.
and a lot of it.
And I was really surprised at 8 months how much I had lost. So the body does change.
Did you experience any, or did you see, I guess, as a male when you entered into the military? My husband was military for a short period of time. Did you experience any of the homophobia, or not experience, sorry, did you see any?
I was very fortunate.
Okay.
Wherever I was, that wasn't present
Okay,
throughout my military career.
that might be a difference between Army and,
Right, yeah, well, going through,
Navy and.
went
I
through
don't
Chilliwack
know.
for
But I
you know,
mean, there was the whole thing with the fruit machine in the, where they were trying to purge.
yeah.
So you yourself really didn't see much of that, so that wasn't,
It
for
was
you a
towards the
reason
very
why
end,
you
but I
were-
did actually serve under 1920, which
What's that?
I actually did serve underneath the CFAO. That could have kicked me out for, what was it, sexual deviant,
Yes.
whatever, just by cross-dressing.
So is any of that fear, I'm sure you must have felt some fear.
Oh yeah, there was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And all the way through any military career, even after that was lifted, there is still a fear that you could be found out
right.
and you didn't know what was going to happen to you. Am I going to get kicked out?
You would
Am I
have
not?
been, you would have been kicked out.
Yeah,
then.
under that CFAO, that
Yeah.
kicked us out until beginning of 1992.
Yeah, yeah.
After that, though, it was okay. But
Yeah.
still, the stigma hung over that what I was doing on a weekend was wrong.
Yeah.
Right? It was frowned upon. Because again, I grew up in a time when if it was a guy in a dress, it was for comic relief, or they were an axe murderer, right? Butt of a joke, whatever. It was always demeaning for a man to be seen in woman's clothing.
Right.
So how did that make me feel? Well,
So, yeah, that was what I was wondering, if that was part of the reason why maybe you stayed in the shadows or didn't feel like
yes,
you could.
it would have been.
Yeah,
It would have been. I don't know. Has anybody seen Harper and Will and Harper?
yeah.
Yeah. So Harper had that house in the middle of nowhere, that wherever rundown towns, whatever that was. That was her safe space where she went to work. In Moose Jaw, I got my own single apartment. That was my safe space. When I went home to study on a weekend, I would dress. I would feel comfortable. That was my safe space. So when Harper actually brought that up, that house, I went, holy crap, I had my safe space, it was my apartment on a weekend. Same idea. So again, the stories from transgender people, the more you listen to them, run into others, what they're saying, what they're writing is exactly the way that I felt throughout my life. It was like, again, wow, what Harper experienced was very similar to what I experienced.
And that's why, personally, I just want to say thank you for sharing your experience, because people need to hear this, and they need to hear even deeper into the reasons why you felt like you had to stay in the shadows.
Yeah.
Because if you leave here and don't have empathy for that, then there's something wrong with you. And that's why I truly want to thank you for sharing. It's wonderful.
Any other deep, probing questions?
When are you coming over for wings and beer?
When am I coming over with wings and beer? That one's hard to answer. As I said, if anyone's got any questions that they don't want to ask in this audience, I'm sticking around. But what I do have here is a handout for allies. Right? These are 10 things every ally should know. And the thing about being an ally, it's not just for the pride community. Right? Being an ally applies to friends, to family, to any marginalized group. And what is written there is applicable to all that. Could be just being an ally to a friend who's going through a divorce. Remember these points. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank
I just wanted to take the stage and take an opportunity here to say a few things. I did say at one point during one of the flag raising ceremonies, like, hey, why are we doing those kind of things? Flag raising, those kind of events. And really there's 3 key points. One is to acknowledge the past, and you did a great job explaining what happened and actually your story through this and how you went through. So acknowledging your past, reflecting and on the present, and looking at the future and how we can do this better. The 10 steps for the Ally program, best way to look into how the future, how can we get better. Michelle and I, we had a chance to have met a long time ago here. We were, maybe it was a captain, I think maybe after, but I learned that we were probably in Afghanistan together at the same time. But I'm just going to share kind of a little bit the opposite side of being here on the wing when Michelle came in with a safe space briefing as CO 405, and she came in. I think
He came in.
He came in and briefed and explained, and I'll be honest, nothing, and I talked to Michelle, I know she knows that I'm going to be explaining this, is I was shocked, like really. And then when we talk about acknowledging the present, that moment, which was the present for me, was a big shock. And then it started to realize, like, why do I feel shocked? Why do I feel that way? And looking at the story behind it. And I was fairly fortunate when I look at everything that's influenced in my life. From having an uncle, got married to an uncle, so I got two uncles on my dad's side. Seeing my grandparents struggling with this, but being able to always support my uncles the way we were going through. My dad being a cop, old school cop, having the mentality, but extremely open for this kind of things. Played golf. One day he was like, "Oh, playing with golf." I don't remember the name of I don't remember her name, but my dad's like, "Yeah, she's a good friend of mine. She's a good golfer." We show up there, and I'm like, "Oh, trans, okay." Again, very surprised and by my dad, and kind of impressed by it. But then you look at the other side, where I got another uncle, police. I come from a family of police, where my cousin, when she explained and say that he was gay, my dad wanted him to see, my uncle wanted him to see a doctor so he could get better. And we're not talking about the 60s, we're talking about the late 90s at this point, right? So like you go, whoa, it's still happening. So when I say acknowledge the past, it's really realizing we were, the majority, when the way we were reacting and thinking about this, we were somewhat off. Some were not completely the right spot, but for me, I was off. President was looking exactly at the team, at the things that were actually brought by the communities, the different communities to the base, how we can get better. Like, so our president really ambassadors that comes in and actually be able to make the line goes forward, right? Where it's now what used to shock us or shock me in my story does not shock me anymore. When I came back as a wing commander, hand over to Colonel Davis, talking about who's the culture evolution, and then it says, well, it's Major Backhouse. I'm like, oh, it's been a while. I think I might have used he at that point, and he goes, it's she, it's Michelle now all the time. I'm like, this is great. No more ambiguity when I call him, because Michelle was probably the only person I was calling by rank when I answered the phone, because I didn't know if it was. Depending on the day, how I couldn't tell on the phone depending on what uniform you were wearing.
It was by gender, and I would change from day to day. One day I would be my masculine self, another day I would be my feminine self. Yeah, it causes some complications.
So, and then I reflect a little bit of one thing you talked about from one of the questions that was asked. With the age difference as well, from a member when I was CO 405. I had a member that came in ready for deployment, and the staff came in the office from ops going like, sir, like we have an issue. I'm like, what's your issue? Member deploying, every paper, it's a cap. We have a male captain on the squadron. Passport is saying female. Like, so what do we do? I'm like, bring the captain, will ask a question. Like, I think it's a mistake when you're going to passport or. So captain comes in, like, oh no, I used to be a female in transition. I guess this paperwork didn't follow. Oh, okay. We're a very conservative country. Official documents are saying female. Are you okay if we switch the remaining of the paperwork to male so that like helps your entry? Sorry, the opposite. It's female. See, I could not carry. Paperwork is so female, so do you mind if you switch all the paperwork back to female so that when you do it, it's going to help your entry in the country, end up being eventually even arrested. So there's like no concerns. We did this, I think. Member changed the official document after. The collaboration, and then like I said, the staff were like, oh my God, I'm like, what? It's kind of normal. But I think that normality was brought up by my life experience, my family experience, Michelle, some of the folks as well that went through the transition, just kind of helped bring this new normal. So when we say moving the line forward, it's what like the group of all the communities working on that to actually achieve, and I think it's working well. So Thanks for sharing all that stuff. Thanks for being open about it as well.
There's just that one thing there as well about normalizing things. It's great. We're at a place now where we have all our rights and freedoms, and it can get eroded so quickly. And so that's something to be very vigilant about, especially for us, that we keep that in mind, and that it is one of the biggest worries. And it's not just the Defense Team Pride Advisory Organization, it's also the Defense Women's Advisory Organization, that we're all worried about erosion of our own individual rights. And that's one of our biggest fears when the question was asked. And by being vigilant, by being visible, by showing people that we are just regular human beings, just that we have, we're a little different. Everybody's different. Look around. Not a single person in this room is the same. Actually, that's the diversity part. We're all different. But that is something to remember, that we still have a fight, technically, to keep up. And with the support of senior leadership, we have a good chance. Thanks.
No problem. But yeah, so thanks. Like I say, I did say the new normal, but I acknowledge, just point out. But it makes it kind of easier to actually I lost my thoughts a little bit. But anyway, to proceed and move forward to the right spot. And again, working forward, there's still, and you highlighted in the last comments, that there's always room for improvement.
Yep.
So we're going to keep working on that piece. So that's about it. So again, thank you for sharing.
Yep.
And I know you're not the only one, but you're kind of the center stage, and the focus is on you, but acknowledging is the focus as well.
And that's why because I want to make sure that it's not going to be difficult for anyone else who follows.
Yeah, and as funny as it sounds, actually, Captain, I got an email yesterday from the captain, because trying to apply to a new trade, looking for recommendation, been working hard to try to get this not happen again this year. We're trying to find new techniques to support the members. But the relation of having an open relationship, open communication, line of communication, continue supporting our members. That's what it's about, and it doesn't matter where it comes from.